Hi, everyone, and welcome to Foundations of Algorithm. Today is our last lecture of the semester, so thank you all for being here today. And yeah. Thank you. I haven't been here long enough to deserve that, but thank you. As you all know, I'm Dr. Sasha Sarain, and I was here for some parts of the earlier semester, but I couldn't have been here for the last half. But on our last lecture today, I wanted to stop by and say hi to everyone, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with all of you for this semester, as well as for all the good work you've all put into this course. I was helping with the A1 marking and all that and seeing some really good stuff from everyone. And so I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the effort you put into all of this. I won't be able to be here all lecture today, but I will be here until the break in the middle of class. And we do have some fun surprise snacks for you all. So please stick around for that, as well as for this really exciting segment that is coming up. So without further ado, could I please get a round of applause for our subject coordinator, Dr. Sean and Connie.
Good morning, everyone, and for the last time, or second last time, welcome to Foundations of Algorithms. I'm so glad to be here with you today. But along with myself, we do have a special guest today, and that is Anne-Aélis Perfrement, who is a former student of Foundations of Algorithms, who I'm so excited to bring back today. Along with many of you, she completed her studies here at the University of Melbourne, graduating in 2018, and is now a senior data analyst at a firm called Quantium, where she deals primarily with retail data. And we'll hear a little bit more about that and about the way that her education has shaped her ability and her professional life, as well as hearing a little bit about some life messages that are good to take away, I think, from someone else who's been in your position not all that long ago. Anyway, without further ado, could we please have a large round of applause for our guest today, Anne-Aélis. Thank you very much. Welcome. Lovely to see you. If you want to take a seat here, and we're going to be running this as a fireside chat. So we've got a couple of discussion points prepared, but hopefully Anne-Aélis will share with us some stories of her time, both in university and after. So feel free to take a seat.
Good morning. My name is Anelise. Thank you, Shannon, for having me visit your class today. Congrats on finishing your semester and good luck for your exams. In terms of my education, I finished up in 2018. And I took this class many, many years ago. I did not have a good run at all. In fact, I failed this class, but then, somehow made it through uni and then recently finished a Master's of Computer Science and graduated on Monday. So, yes, that's a bit of my character arc. Yes. Do you have a question?
How many times did you have to take the subject before you finally?
That is a fantastic question.
Maybe just repeat the question for everyone.
Yep. So the question over here was, how many times did I have to take the subject to, I think your question was, get it in the end?
Yeah, to pass.
Yeah, to pass.
Because I'll also say I have failed the subject once as well.
Okay, great. Not great, but sorry. I will answer that question for sure. The main thing, I think, is I might do this as part of the introduction, where I'm going to track back through what I did at uni, and then I'll answer your question. What was your name, sorry?
Vincent.
Vincent. Thank you, Vincent. Cool. Shall we go from...
Yeah, so I wanted to start us off with maybe you giving us a little bit more about your story, how you ended up where you are today, particularly like how you got from being a wide-eyed first-year uni student all the way to being a senior analyst now.
Cool. All right, so story time, buckle up. In high school, probably like most of you, I really liked maths and physics, and I also really liked languages. I liked those subjects because it was quite objective. You either got the mark or you didn't get the mark. I wanted to be strategic, get a good ATAR, be able to go to uni. After year 12, I took a gap year. I went and lived in China for a year to study Chinese, and then I came back to Melbourne Uni to start my Bachelor of Science. So in my first year, at the time, you had to pick 3 different scientific areas. So I did some physics, I did some comp sci, I did some maths. Comp sci was chaos, absolute chaos. Shannon was my tutor, and thank God, because I got to, week 9 or something, and I was just struggle street, absolute struggle street. But I was very lucky because you turned around and said, hey, I can help you a little bit. And then I was able to pass the class and move on with the course. Afterwards, I did take Foundations of Algorithms with your predecessor.
He's still here, just the other
cool.
semester.
He's still here. Great. This was a very challenging time in my life. I had a lot of personal family situations that kind of blew up in my face. And so my uni study, et cetera, kind of took a really big beating. And then Alistair actually sat me down and was like, look, you got to be strategic. Think about where you can get your marks. Is this class worth doing, given you need to also do your other classes? I think the moral of the story is I did not even make it to the end of the Foundations of Algorithms class because I decided that I was just going to cut my losses, pass my other classes and move on. So in terms of the other subjects I took some physics, took some probability, and then just went down the maths course. So some discrete maths, some operations research type stuff, and then some vector calc, real analysis, trying to think some of the other subjects I did. And I finally finished up with some algebra, geometry, and the pure maths specialization. So got through uni. It was very, very difficult, and I'm very lucky that I had tutors along the way that were able to kind of steer me back on course, which was a really, really big learning for me, and probably for you, Vincent, as well. If you need help, the lesson I had to learn was you need to ask for help. When I started, I was too much ego. My ego was like, I'm fine if I just sit down and I'll eventually get it. Moral of the story, sometimes when you're stuck, you're stuck. You have to reach out for help. You have to find someone who's going to explain it in a different way, or someone who's just going to give you the little push to get over whatever bump you're facing at that moment. After uni, I took 6 months off and I went to live in France with my family for a little bit, came back and I started a graduate program in a consulting firm. These consulting firms, they're really big. They've got lots of different teams. The team that I joined was a data and cloud platforms team. So some data analysis, a lot of cloud platforms, so all your big players in the industry, building basically databases so that they can use their data to do whatever they need to do to make their business run better or earn more money or whatever. I stayed in that consulting firm for 2 years. This is where I basically learnt to program on the job because I didn't really do it at uni. And then after a while, the pandemic came along and I was basically decided that now was the time to move into a company that had access to a lot more data and that had, for me, better quality assurance. What does that mean? Basically working to a higher standard. So a lot more around code reviews, a lot more about analytical reviews. And so I moved to the company where I am currently, which is called Quantium, which is an Australian company. And I've been there for 4 years. I've worked with a mix of banking data, retail data, and it's gone very well, surprisingly. Or maybe not surprisingly, I don't know. I worked hard. And then 2 years ago, I began a Masters of Computer Science, which was in part funded by my company. And the one I picked enabled me to do it in parallel with my studies. So lots and lots of professionals like myself taking the class on after hours and also on the weekend. And that's where I am today. If you want, I can go into various...
So I think one thing that's particularly interesting is you did not have the best run with uni the first time around, but you persisted pretty well. And I think that part of the story is interesting, and I'm sure we'll get some questions about that after. But you turned around after having had that experience and then went back to uni at a later stage. And so walk us through your thought process a little. Why is it something about the value of formal education that you think made it worthwhile going back? And particularly when it was computer science that you'd struggled with a bit, you actually chose to go back into computer science. So walk us through that journey a little more.
So the advantage of formal study is it is structured, and I like structure a lot. If I'm left to my own devices, like many of us, I think it's hard to organize yourself to sit down and learn things. So yeah, it's extremely expensive to do formal study, but also having that structure and the network of students and the network of tutors and lecturers helped a lot. I also really enjoyed that you're working towards an assignment, for example, and it's quite clear what you need to achieve, which is very, very different to working in industry. In industry, you just get vague scope, and you need to make it work. It's hard, you work in a very different way. But the benefit of formal study is you do kind of get a clear pathway to apply certain tools and techniques and then deliver that in an assignment. So that was my motivation. Why computer science when I hated it when I was here? I think that at the time I was not mature enough to realize that I just needed to get over whatever apprehensions I had about the course. And yeah, it was a little bit difficult at the start, but sometimes you just need to be the adult in the room and just say, stop, start again. You can get through the content. I wasn't good at that when I was 19. It took me a while. But when I came back to formal study, I had a very, very different attitude. And all of a sudden I was finding like coding for 10 hours a day to get my assignments done was like no longer an issue. And in fact, I was waking up like keen to do my programming assignments, which is incredible if you consider my experience in my undergrad. So I think it came down to maturity, and it also came down to realizing the value of the formal study and tying it back to a lot of my professional experiences. Because what I did, and perhaps you find difficult in undergrad, is you learn all these things, but you don't really know how they work in the real world. Having worked for 6 or 7 years, it's much easier for me to see how things tie in together. And that, to me, just makes it a lot easier to understand, like, okay, cool, I actually need to learn this and this is why.
So one other thing, we've spoken a little over the years, and one thing you expressed at some point was frustration around like the technical depth with which you were exposed to in some different parts or points in your career. And so I'm wondering if you can reflect for us a little bit on where you actually see the value of computer science or algorithms itself in your professional life, aside from just like getting the tasks done.
Yep. So in my job as a data scientist, it's a term that is really broad. And if you ask anyone who's a data scientist what they actually do, you're going to get as many different responses as there are people. So in my role, we do a mix of data engineering, data analytics, but then also a lot of consulting.
Might have to explain what data engineering and analytics are for all of us.
All right. So winding back, data engineering is basically get data from point A to point B. You want to make sure that it gets there in a secure manner. You want to make sure that it gets there all of the data. You want to make sure that it's there in the frequency that you want it. You want to make sure that it's clean. And it's using a lot of different tools. You're using database tools. You're using, a whole lot of like orchestration tools. So scheduling jobs to move things across systems. That's data engineering. It's a lot less focused on the outcome, more on the method and the process of getting data from A to B. Data analytics is once you have the data, hopefully clean and nice to work with, which is not always the case, looking at the data and saying, okay, cool, what can I do with it now? Can I aggregate it? Can I train a model on it? Can I make a decision based on this data? Because that's the crux of data science. You're basically helping a business make a decision. And usually they're just trying to compare between two things, and you're using the data as the tool to help them make that decision. Should we sell this product or that product? Should we offer this loan or that loan? That's data analytics and data science. There's a lot of training models as well. That's a big part of it. So if I feed in the data, what's it going to predict as the outcome for this customer or that customer? And then finally, what is consulting? Consulting is a business calls you up and says, I have a problem. No one knows in my business how to fix this. You bring someone in from another company and say, now it's your problem. And then that's the simple version. Of course, consulting firms don't describe it that way. They pay a premium, but then you come out with some sort of solution for them or a recommendation. You should do this, and this is how you should do it. So is that a good enough definition?
Yeah. So our train of thought was, okay, so you had some frustration about the lack of depth sometimes in the job.
So I think that is probably a frustration you will find for many jobs in the industry. Like the really fun, spicy stuff is quite rare. And that's where you might consider like, okay, what do you really like about your course? Do you really like the fact that you're pushing the boundary and you're having to come up with new ways of doing things? In that case, you might want to do something either in academia and do further research, or you might want to really target the research and development type jobs, because they do exist. And these are the jobs where they're really trying hard to apply algorithms in a new way or use hardware in a different way, so on and so forth. A lot of more typical jobs, I'm going to use the word vanilla, a bit more vanilla jobs, you're using a lot of data and you're using a lot of programming, but a lot of the time you're using or you're building on top of work other people have done. So you're using packages that have already been provided for you. And yes, you have to know how to use, whatever modeling package correctly, but you don't have to build it from scratch. So I think yes, sometimes there is a bit of technical depth, sometimes there's not as much as you'd want. You can also kind of decide what you do.
So tell us a little more about how you've done that in your job.
So in my company, we have something that is quite special. We actually have people who are effectively paid to just solve problems. So that means that you will take something that we don't know how to solve. The client will say, hey, I actually need a system that does this. We look at the data, we're not sure how to get there. And their job is just to sit down and propose solutions. So you can get jobs like that. My job is not quite like that. My job is a lot closer to, I call myself a translator, because I have the business on one side saying, hey, we want to solve whatever problem. I've got data engineering on the other side being like, here's the data we have available. I'm in the middle and I need to make it work. So that can mean, for example, that can mean that, I'll give a concrete example. So we do customer analytics for a lot of the big retailers across the world. And so if you want to do customer analytics, a really important thing that you need to be able to do is have a customer base on which you can do customer analytics. That's not obvious, because if you think about when you go into a shop, they don't actually know who goes in the shop unless they're looking at your loyalty program. So if you're tapping like your Qantas frequent flyer card or something else, then they can say, yep, cool, Ella walked into this shop, whatever. But if you want to be able to do your analytics, you need to still be able to like estimate that really well. And so that basically comes down to like a data science problem where it's like, given I have only this much information, but I want to know about that much information, what can I do? How can I extrapolate? How can I stratify? How can I build a sample that I can then use for customer analytics? That kind of stuff is actually really fun, because you've got some data sets you can play with. You've got the Australian Bureau of Stats data that you can play with. You've got our data you can play with, but you still need to find solutions to make it work. And this is where the depth and the fun stuff happens.
So walk us through a little bit then, a day in the life of Anne-Aélis.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of where I'm at now in my career, I have a team of 6, if I don't count myself. And so I set a lot of the agenda for what we do. So we will be given projects. We've got a couple of projects right now. We are rebuilding a customer sample at the moment. And we're also trying to develop a couple of use cases with some generative AI tools. So my job is to scope. What does scoping mean? It means figure out what you're going to do with the team. Who's going to do what? What are you going to do at the end? How are you going to say this project has been successful? You might need to define a couple of metrics. You might need to, and defining metrics is actually a very hard thing to do. This is where the analytics and the data science comes in. And then you actually have to start doing the solution design. Solution design is the fun bit. This is where your creativity comes into it, because you have your set of constraints on both sides, your data, your engineering, your systems, and then also your business constraints. You've also got constraints around time and funding. So they might say, look, we just want something like do it as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. Or they might say, we need this system to be super robust. We want it to run for 5 years. So you're going to play with different constraints. And then you start proposing solutions. And you say, okay, we're going to iterate and we're going to make a first, what is called a POC, a proof of concept, or an MVP, a minimal viable product. And you start building something, and you might just code it up in a Jupyter notebook and just be like, look, here's some data I can use. Here's some stuff I can do. Here's an example on 10,000 customers. And then you'll take it back and say, hey, is this what you want? Then you'll get all the feedback. You'll talk to engineering and they'll say, actually, no, you can't do it this way because of X, Y, Z or whatever. And then you start iterating until you have a solution. And if you do your job well, you've defined all your success criteria at the start, all the metrics you want to meet, all the funding that you want to meet, so on and so forth. And then you can say, we've either ticked all those boxes, yes or no. So that's a bird's eye view of what I do in my job.
So turning to something a little different. So throughout your time, even through university and after, one thing that you've been quite passionate about is inclusion in the field. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about some of the things that you've seen, as well as some of the things that you've done to try and make that a better reality.
Yep. So it is an interesting industry because, there's a lot of smart people. That's obvious. Everyone here in the room is smart. If you're studying this, you're not an idiot. But in terms of how I think this then plays out in the industry, you can look around. There's the thing that I'm probably the most interested in myself is gender diversity, and that is it's not as good as it should be, is what I will say. We've got in Australia, sadly, like declining rates of women studying maths and things like that, which then has a trickle effect into the industry. And there are calls where I'm on a call and there's like, I am the only woman on the call, and then the only other women sometimes on calls are even a lot more junior than me. And so if you look up into like senior leadership, there's very few women. Now, whether it's women or another minority group, I think that the issue is that if you don't get diverse perspectives at the table, a lot of the decisions you make are really, they answer one particular question, but they don't really take into account all the other facets. So if you think about, okay, you're making decisions around healthcare, it's really important that you get like a really, really broad view of people because society is super diverse. And if you're designing systems or decision algorithms or whatever that is going to impact a broad range of people, you need to be able to have those perspectives in the room. How is it going in industry? Look, I think that there is a push to get more diverse people into programming courses, so on and so forth. I think the main thing is when you are in industry, like try and think broadly. Have mates that are from different parts of society. And if you can have as many different perspectives that you then take into everything you do, not just work, I think that that's probably the best thing you can do. Personally, what do? I come to events like this to talk to people that are looking at the industry, answer any questions, concerns, either motivate you or demotivate you, depending on what you hear. And then, yeah, just through a bit of like private mentoring with a few people that have gotten in touch as well.
And so maybe we'll do one or two more questions before opening up to all of you. So you talked a bit about like, hopefully the data comes in clean. What is the most surprising, well, what was the most surprising thing to you about the way that data is in the real world when we try and deal with it, as opposed to maybe some of the algorithms that we've been dealing with in class around like sorting and searching and that sort of thing?
Yeah. They're so fun, those ones. The difference between industry and university is in university, the problems are very clearly defined. You do this, you get that mark. If you don't show you're working, you don't get the mark. And you get the data provided. You often get a lot of the things provided. Like you might even have like a virtual machine all set up for you, ready to go. You don't get that in the real world. So yes, it's really sometimes it's very, very messy data if you're lucky and you work in a company like mine. We have teams that clean the data for us and then get it to us really nice. But previously, for example, a couple of years ago, I worked for the National Cancer Screening Registry, and this was a bunch of Medicare data and a bunch of like GP data. And this was about like a cancer screening program. So there's a lot of very personal information in there, but also because a lot of it is manually entered, you get like absolute chaos in the data. And sometimes you're trying to build things and you're trying to deal with setting like a column to be a specific data type and then something breaks. And so really you have to be very, very careful and like set up proper systems along the way so that you cull all the stuff that's bad or you transform it because, yeah, it will break your systems. Data is extremely messy. I did, some work on data quality for another project I worked on, trying to evaluate like how much of the data is useful. Sometimes you're looking at something like 40% of it is useful and the rest is in the bin. That obviously changes a lot of what you can do with it afterwards. Like the more data you have, not always, but often is a very good thing. So yeah, it's a very, very different reality. But I think, look, it's a constraint that you work with. And personally, like I like my job because it's pretty much constraint optimization. Like I've either got this much data or not. I have this much money to play with. I have this much time. I have these tools available to me. I know these particular techniques. I know to program in these couple of languages. Go. Solve the problem. So,
do you have any funny stories of like a data incident or something you tried to build that didn't work? Or
so, in the same job at the Cancer Screening Registry, this is when I was just learning to program in SQL. So SQL is a structured query language. Do you teach that here?
Not in this class, but we do teach it.
Cool. So it's the basis. If you want a job in the industry, you need to learn SQL. You're all learning Python, I think, and C as well.
C this semester.
C is less useful for a lot of jobs. If you want to go into further research or go into like the R&D teams, yes, you'll need C. But for all your other jobs, Python and SQL are what you will be using. If you have never used SQL, just spend a couple of afternoons and you'll be like fluent enough. SQL is basically, I have lots and lots of data. How do I ping this data? How do I get this data? And so I had to learn SQL on the job, and we were with all these huge databases. And a concept that I had never learned was the concept of stages. So when you're programming, if you think about how you use GitHub, you've got your version control, you've got your dev branches, you've got your testing branches, you've got your production branches.
We don't know that yet.
Okay, cool. This is
We're still learning.
cool. The concept is there's one place where you can mess around and it's a playground and you can do whatever you want. There's one place where you start to build the code and then you get other people to look at it. That's the testing area. And then production, this is the code. If this breaks, everything breaks. Your systems go down, your data's not available, chaos. I didn't know this when I started working, and we had a lot of data in the production space. Guess who deleted it all? That's it. That was like day 3 on the job.
Did you get fired?
I did not get fired, but I learned what I needed to learn on that day. And it caused a lot of problems.
And that's why we have backups. So another thing to learn about not pushing direct
Backup
to production
everything.
is having
Everything.
backups.
And also control your access. Do not get the graduate to touch the production data. I think that was a failing on their end, not my end, but
Blame the manager.
always. No, not always. Sometimes you're...
Well, now that you're the manager.
Yeah, don't blame me.
So I think now is a good time for us to pause for some questions from the audience, and we've got some microphones. Danny, do you want to help us out? Grab a couple of the mics and...
So you said you had a background in mathematics and then you kind of continued and went into data analytics analysis and now you're in management.
Yep.
How did you kind of find that process from a background in maths into more comp-sci and then into also leading a team?
Yep. So the question was for everybody else, started in maths, started working in data analytics, and now I'm towards the management side in that field. How was that process? The start of the process was I just chose maths because I liked it. And I didn't really think about how it would play out because I wasn't very mature. And I also had very little exposure to the real world. Also, in terms of students these days, they're very aware that they want to get a good job and they want to do an internship and they want to do all this stuff. I was oblivious. I just picked what I liked. And I really probably would have kept going with maths if I felt that there was an avenue for me because I had a lot of fun. But because my university career here was chaotic, it was best for me to just go out and get a job. I found that getting a job, having the math background is what made the difference. So yes, my grades weren't very good, but they were still like, look, you've got a math degree. So despite the fact your grades aren't good, we can still see that you're numerate. You can work with numbers. And that's a very, very, very valuable skill. And then I was the only graduate they hired who couldn't program. They said, that's fine. You'll just learn on the job. So having the maths was actually the thing that pushed me over the edge. There were also other things that helped me get a job. I had a lot of experience in sales. I had a tutoring, I tutor on the side. So there was other experiences that bolstered that. But the maths is probably the most valuable thing for you to take into industry. Then how did I get into data science? Really just, I like data. Like it's really fun. It's really chaotic. There's a lot of funny stories like the one I just told you, and also working with like translating between 2 different worlds. A lot of funny stuff happens. I'm not going to say it because sometimes it's embarrassing, the stuff that happens, but it's entertaining. The people you work with are really, really good because again, the selection is a certain kind of person. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you studying?
I'm studying maths as
What
well,
kind?
and a few friends as well.
What type of maths?
Applied mathematics.
Which one?
Applied.
Applied. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good for getting jobs too. Yep. Yep.
And good for doing research too.
Oh, as well, sorry.
More questions? Ella.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I think there's a bit of a stereotype that like computer science and maths people aren't very social. How do you find that like in your job that you get like the option to talk to people and still sort of make those connections?
The reason I'm good at my job is because I'm good at talking to people. The baseline is you can do your job. The baseline is you're numerate and you can program. That's the baseline. What makes you different? What makes you good at your job? Can you talk to the engineers and the business people? Can you solve the problem? Can you actually extract the information you need? Can you get them to agree to do whatever? These skills are super, super, super important. And especially now, like now there's a lot of things like if I don't know how to code it, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT. Like, honestly, like I could spend, oh, sorry, still get an education, please, it's worth it. You still need to be able to assess whether the output of ChatGPT or whatever you use is actually good, and you need to be able to test it, and you need to be able to determine, like, okay, cool, does this still follow the right coding protocols that I want? Is it still following whatever standards you've set? But the socializing and the ability to get along, understand what people want, communicate is super, 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 super valuable. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. That's like what I like about working with people. So I want to, like, even though I'm really interested in programmers, like, I want to see like how that goes to working with other people.
Yeah. But like, if you're interested in things like in any job you do, communication is going to be fundamental. Look at you. Your job is communication. Like, yes, you're very good at computer science, but at the end of the day, if you couldn't communicate to all of you, what's the point? You have knowledge that you can't take and share. You can't build anything if you can't work with others. So,
and even as a researcher, no one cares how great your thoughts are unless you've written them down into a paper or given a great talk about it that people remember. If people don't have a way to interact with what you're doing, your skills are only worth so much.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, you've mentioned a bit about like growing in maturity and coming back to study. What do you think it was that helped you develop that?
So the question is, where did I get the maturity to come back to study? Life. Yeah, a number of roller coasters. I think sometimes when, bad things happen in your life, like in my case, like just family drama, uni being really chaotic, traveling a lot as well, like that can be very hard because I did a lot of solo travel. All these sorts of things, like they can be difficult, but they do teach you resilience and you get to know yourself. And for example, now I know how to deal with me. I know how to sit myself down. And for example, I work with the Pomodoro technique. Like I do 20-minute bursts and I listen to like the same song over and over and over again just to like lock in, get my thing done, take my little breaks, come back. But it took me a very long time to figure out that worked for me. So life and then trial and error. And then sometimes you just have to have a long, hard talk with yourself and just kind of kick yourself in the butt and just, yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about like where you found the resilience to get through some of the setbacks at uni, particularly when you were failing some subjects. Like, how did you convince yourself to still show up and still get motivated to finish the degree, to do better, and to keep progressing?
That is such a good question. A big thing was other people literally picking me up and being like, stop it, like sort it out. Like you were one of them. Also, Dr. Mangelsdorf in the maths department. I failed vector calculus as well. Hated that class, which is so funny because I look at the content now and I'm like, what was my problem with it? But I just didn't like the class. And then she sat me down and she was like, look, none of this. You will sign up for my tutorial. It is on Tuesday mornings. I will not take no for an answer. And she made sure that I was there and that I did the course and she checked in with me. And so that was incredibly valuable because I was not mature enough to do that. So people pick me up and then eventually the resilience, I don't know, I'm just very stubborn. So I decided that I'd finish the course and then being stubborn will get you very far sometimes. So
in the right way, not about your grades, but about your ability to like persist and keep going through.
Just pick yourself up again and again and again.
Okay, I know we promised Aaron would get the next question.
You mentioned research type jobs. I was just wondering, outside of maybe generative AI and climate science, is there anything else like in that field?
Yeah. So the question is for research type jobs beyond climate science and generative AI, is there work? There is work. You need to think about what's available in Australia. So in Australia, certain things get funded more than others. And then you might look at other markets like the American market. You might look at the European market. You probably have more information than I do on this.
Yeah, feel free to answer as well.
Like my brother works in advanced manufacturing and he's got like a really cool R&D job. What else can I think about? Some stuff in the biosphere is quite well funded in Australia. Like there's a lot of money for health research. So if you can kind of get your comp sci into that sort of track, you'll probably be able to get access to some good projects.
And then there are kind of multiple kind of senses in which one can do research. You can do applied corporate research, so that's where you're part of a lab working for a big company, but they give you a little more leeway to explore your own problems. So there might be a lab director. Then there are things like national labs, such as CSIRO, which still have a duty to. They have some mandate from the government by which they're meant to pursue projects in Australia's interests, so that tends to be a little more directed and a little bit commercial, and then all the way to academic research, which is really where you have the opportunity to set your own agenda. And that is, I think, the big thing that differentiates academic research from the other types of research, is you can pursue a problem even if you don't think that problem will be commercially beneficial or necessarily result in something saleable in the short term. And that doesn't mean that you should pursue problems that no one cares about, but it means that if you think there's a problem that's not being looked at enough, academia is a good place to kind of stake your claim on it. But on the other hand, or institutionalized research in corporations and in government labs, you can often have a lot more ease of access to resources. You can have much clearer supervision, which can also help if you're the kind of person who has trouble pursuing your own projects. That kind of guidance can really help. Now, in terms of what's available in Australia, we definitely do have some sectors where there's more investment than others. So computational biomedicine is a huge one, whether that's in genetics or pharmaceuticals or disease modeling. There's lots of places for data science and computer science there. But also you will find, if there's something that really speaks to your heart, let's say you really care about transaction fraud, there are going to be places in the country where there are research jobs in like transaction fraud, for example. And so I think giving yourself permission to pursue the types of things you're interested in can be worthwhile.
That's perfect. Thank you.
If you want to do transaction fraud, come work with me.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, I'm not a student of this class. I've been helping Shannon out a lot, but I'm a maths master's student.
Cool.
And I wanted to ask, because I haven't really taken many classes before. I really self-direct my own learning when it comes to like coding and stuff like that. And I just wanted to ask, since you have a job in the industry and you have that experience, how important would it be for someone like me to reflect my ability like that on my academic transcript, say, rather than I say, oh, I'm sort of self-taught or I know how to do a lot of these things myself?
I think being self-taught is very cool. If you want to put that on your CV, if you've got the formal study, also very cool. I think be honest with what you put on your CV, and when you do interviews, be very, very honest. Like, don't bluff. Like, they looked at my transcript and were like, what is this? And then I explained, and then they're like, okay, cool. But like, there's a story and there's value in it. For you, are you looking for a particular job? Are you looking to transition or?
Well, I don't have it, like I was thinking about going for a PhD later, but I do want to end up working in industry doing things. And I did it in actuarial undergrad here, so I do have coding experience, but it's not particularly deep. And I guess that my main thing was I don't have a reflection of like, oh, I've taken coding classes. So they can look at that and be like, oh, he knows how to do XYZ coding. So I just want to know like what priority that has in terms of employers and whether I can, have a similar sort of opportunity for those jobs as other people who have done those classes.
Okay, that's a good question. I think in any CV, you write the skills that you have. So if you've got skills in programming, it doesn't matter how you acquired them, you put them on the page, then companies will assess you. They will make you do a technical assessment. So in my job, all the grads have to do a technical assessment. When I moved over, I had to do a technical assessment. So if you've got the skills and you do the test and you pass the test, it doesn't matter how you got the skills, you've passed. So in terms of what priority you might do, just start looking for jobs, apply, then see how you go, see if certain iterations of your CV work better than others. The other thing I might suggest is like put some coding projects online. If you've got like a GitHub, you can put some stuff there. If you want to do some Kaggle competitions, like they're a really good thing. If you want to, a lot of the coding websites, you can like demonstrate that you've got X, Y, Z level. You can put that forward as well. So build your profile and then, that would be my advice. But just start putting the CV out there and see what happens, because it's very hard. You don't have any data points right now as to whether your CV is getting hits or not. So until you do that, it's going to be hard to say how you should position your CV.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I know, Sam, you've been waiting. We'll get to you, don't worry.
Hi, I have two questions. Firstly, I'm also majoring in maths, and I'm just wondering, is there a specific specialization you would think that's better for getting jobs in industry?
So the question is, also majoring in maths, is there a specific major that is better for getting jobs than others? I think in terms of getting jobs, I got pure maths. Most useless major for getting a job. I will say that.
Except in cryptography.
Except in cryptography. But like my interviewers didn't even know what pure maths was. So I had to explain that in my interview. But it's not widely held knowledge. Look, I wouldn't stress too much. Do what you're interested in. If you love discrete maths, do it. If you love stats, do it, because that'll take you much, much further, because you like the stuff, you're going to be curious, you're going to reach out to other people that are similar, you're going to want to do work experience placements or research projects in that area. Don't worry about what's strategic. You're an undergrad, just do what you like.
Thank you. And also, secondly, in terms of in Melbourne specifically, how's the job market for data science and consulting and jobs like that?
So the question is, how is the job market currently for data science? Good question. I think it is a challenging time. I think generative AI has really changed the playing field. So previously, if you had coding skills, that was enough. Now there's a lot of things we assume you can actually kind of get your code through ChatGPT or other things, but then you're able to work with it, you're able to apply it to business problems. So they're probably going to start looking for more of the hard to automate skills. If your skill is automatable, it will be automated. If your skill is very hard to automate, that's a selling point, and that's something that's going to get you in the door and into a job. So have a think about, do you have hybrid skills? Do you have a major in another area? Like, okay, maybe you also have a major in like something in biology or something. That's cool. That's like an association of two things that is interesting. Do you have experience teaching? Do you have experience in sales? How can you construct an interesting profile that is not ChatGPT-able?
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Hi. So you mentioned how in uni, a lot of the stuff that helped you was like specific lecturers and like faculty members like talking to you and like specifically helping you. And I was just wondering how in kind of a university environment, this is like my first semester, so my experience with uni is that it's a very big, like kind of unpersonalized space where you've got, 400 students in the one class. How did you kind of get in a position where the lecturers and the faculty members were like coming to you and sitting down with you and helping you specifically? And I guess just to tack on another question at the end of that, how important would you say the networking side of getting a job was? Like finding connections, like talking to people, being like, oh, is there a job over here? I'll refer you to a job, that kind of thing.
So the question was, how did you get into a position where people from the university were helping you, if university feels quite impersonal? And the second question was, what about the networking aspect? How important is it? First question, I did uni pre-COVID, and I think that that's a big different, there's a big difference. Like I was here pretty much every second or every day pretty much. Online classes didn't exist. There was one time where I tore my foot and I was on crutches, so I couldn't get up to the theatres in the maths building, and I asked the maths department if they would record the lectures for me, and they said no. So that was the world before, and so I had to make friends because otherwise I would get no class notes. But the main thing is to get into, come to class, chat to people. Some people are friendlier than others. Shanann's very, very friendly. I benefited from that as well. For the maths department, it's a much smaller department, so you would know, the maths department's kind of tiny. And if you're involved in the Maths Society and a couple of events here and there, you start to know people. Also, just talk to them. They have office hours and emails, so reach out to them and don't be afraid to say, hey, I need a bit of help. if they're here and they're teaching you particularly if they're teaching first year courses, they've probably got quite a bit of goodwill in them. They care about you, they care about your education, they want the next generation to know things. Their disposition is going to be helpful, and no one is going to turn you away and say, like, don't contact me. So just contact them. For the second half of the question, the networking and the connections, like, yeah, you can learn from books and you can learn knowledge, but so much of your learning in life is going to be from other people. So even just from like do you thirst for knowledge? Yes or no? Talk to people. The perspectives you'll gain. And even if you think about you're doing a maths assignment and you're stuck and you're like, I don't get it. If you can go to one friend and be like, hey, can you explain this to me? You're going to get one explanation. You go to a second friend, they're going to explain it a different way. You're going to go to a third friend, they're going to explain it a different way. You go to the lecturer another way. And that is so rich because your understanding is going to be so much better than if it was just by yourself sometimes. Network, network, network. Make friends along the way, but yes, it will serve later in your job. Like I've referred a couple of people into my job. I'm now working with someone that I referred in from my uni degree. Like that kind of stuff helps. If you've got particular people in your course where you're like, wow, they're really good at this. Like keep that in mind. And maybe 5 years down the track, you're going to be like, hey, so-and-so was really good. Can I reach out to them? Or you might remember that so-and-so did an internship somewhere and you're interested in that place. Message them. This is kind of how the world works. And the most important thing is to gain as much information as you can. If you want an internship somewhere, talk to someone that's worked there. If you want a job somewhere, talk to someone that works there. And for my job at Quantium, when I decided I wanted a job there, I put out a call on Facebook and I said, hello, who do I know that works at Quantium? And then 8 people got back to me and I spoke to 8 people on the phone. 7 of them said it was a good experience. 1 had a bad experience. That was how I got all my information. And then when I sat the interviews, it was so much easier because I already had lots of information. And that was just networking.
So I think we're just about ready to wrap up, but I've got one more question for you, which is you have all these young, eager-faced students here. What's the advice you're going to give them, and particularly drawing from some of your experience about making it through the harder times?
That's my advice. So I've already said ask for help, so we've covered that. If you have weird interests, pursue them. Yeah. I'll say that. If you like something and you're like, oh, it's kind of uncool, or people think I'm really weird for liking this, who cares? Like, go for it, because that's what makes life interesting, and it'll actually pan out to be very, very useful because the things that you like, you'll typically get good at. You'll typically have more specialized knowledge, and then people will come to you because it'll be like, hey, this person knows all this stuff. And then you'll start to create a life and a career that kind of resembles what you like. So that would be my advice. Pursue your weird interests. Yeah.
And with those closing words, oh, Gaurav, you've got some burning...
On that point about interests, like I have a lot of interests that are like very sparse and like, as you may say, weird. Do you think that it's like better at this time in undergrad to be pursuing and looking at all of your like, you know, various interests? Like, is it okay for me to just do a bunch of just subjects because I'm like, this would be really cool and it's not really related to computer science directly, but like I like it and it's just like separate and it's just like a curveball? Or do you think that this is the time to start like specializing and picking like, these are the 2 things that I'm good at or I am still interested in, but these are the 2 things I want to really pursue? Is this a time for exploration or is this a time to like filter down, do you think?
In undergrad, it's the time for exploration, but also probably your whole life is time for exploration. But also think about what you want to be. So my aim is to become really good at, I want to become really good at making decisions. And for me to be able to do that, I need to be able to pull from lots of different areas, comp sci, maths, business, whatever. For you, it might be different. You might say, actually, I really want to become the top specialist in whatever. Think about if you want that. If that's what you want, go for it and specialize. If you're interested in being a bit more of a hybrid person, then just keep exploring. So
also,
both options are valid.
Also, some things that have not been said is Anne-Aélis has skills in a variety of other areas, including ballet, French, and Chinese, and did a diploma of languages as well at the university. Myself, I did a diploma of music. and also have a degree in law. So there's never a moment in which you're like, okay, now is the time where I'm not allowed to explore my interests anymore because I have to be doing the career thing. There's always opportunity to be pursuing the things you love.
And if we reflect on like Shanan's career, the fact he has the law degree is a really useful thing, because then when you start talking about what's the interplay between tech and society, Shanan's actually got knowledge in both those areas. If someone's talking to me about like things more related to language and linguistics and like natural language processing, like, well, because I teach languages and have studied languages, I'm better placed to answer those kinds of questions. So it all comes out in the end as very useful. Yeah.
And so with that, on behalf of the School of Computing and Information Systems and myself and of course our entire class here, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your insights with us and giving a bit of a picture about how to succeed even when it's not working at first. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause?